You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again. And man, today we have another show lined up for y'all. Today we have a special guest, Jeremy Doran. He has an amazing book that we're going to be talking about today, The Little Kids. You can check out thelittlekids.us. It's the website. But first, we're going to learn a little bit more about him and his backstory, because he has a backstory growing up as the youngest of 10 siblings. So first and foremost, man, welcome to the show, Jeremy. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Man, thank you for taking your time and just clearing your schedule for this dialogue. So, man, for our audience, kind of talk about, your life, your career, and what inspired you to write this book.
Well, I am the youngest of 10 kids, and growing up, people wouldn't believe me. So when I was in kindergarten and I would tell people I'm one of 10 kids because we had to draw our whole family on that first day of class, no one would believe me. So I actually had to memorize the names in order so that people would believe that I really was one of 10 kids. And then I found out all of my other siblings ended up doing the same thing. So we are George, Katie, Michael, Carol, Peter, Timmy, Patsy, Lizzie, Sammy, Jerry. So that's us.
Oh, man.
But I do leadership coaching. And what I found was that when I am talking to people about various issues with communication or leadership, the stories I would fall back to were usually about the family, even more so than from business experience that I had. So every time someone said, "Oh, you should write a book about that," eventually I said, "Okay, I'm going to do that."
And or your business that you are the president of, Pinnacle Performance, they go to the website, pinnacle-performance.com. Kind of tell the audience a little bit about your specialties and the core mission.
Yeah, we help great producers become great leaders. So the most common time when I'm hired is when there's a group of people who were so incredible at what they did. Especially, I work with a lot of engineers. They were great at being engineers. Then all of a sudden, they get promoted into management. They usually have a very tough time making that transition. They don't normally get a lot of coaching within the company. So companies will bring me in to help them make the transition from being great doers to great managers, and then eventually great leaders.
And all this, it comes from not just mindset, but action and just learning as you're going through life. But all that comes from goals. And for you, and with today's topic, setting goals outside of your book that we'll be talking a little bit more later, but setting goals for you personally, how have you set that for your life as far as like, okay, 10 years from now, I want to be able to accomplish this. What does that look like for you?
What I do is I do it over and over again. So one thing that I found is when people talk about a midlife crisis, they always talk about it like it's a bad thing, but really it's a good thing. It's a reevaluation of your life. The problem for most people is they've waited too long to do it. So I reevaluate and reset goals often. They're fairly consistent, but I make tweaks as I go. So at the beginning of the year or just before the year starts, I will map out what I want to have accomplished throughout the whole year in all the different areas of my life. And then I break it down by quarter and I break it down by week. And then I look at that weekly and I adjust what I want to get done this one week. But I'm also always looking at what I want to accomplish throughout the year. And then the bucket list goals that I want to accomplish at some point, in my life. So those are the big ones. And I work towards them slowly. The weekly ones I work towards quicker.
And when people visit your website, pinnacle-performance.com, and they just read a little bit more in detail about you, I mean, it's no surprise why you are successful. You really have, just looking at the website, it's very detail oriented and it screams professional. And you also are author, a part of the book, The Little Kids, and they go to thelittlekids.us. What I'm getting at is all this comes from your decisions and your choices that you're consistently making. No one's perfect. No one's saying that. But the thing is, you can look at someone's life and see the time that they spent to build the life. So for you, were there some lessons that that helped you along the way? Because I mean, being one of the 10 kids, I mean, man, I'm sure there was a lot of lessons to be learned.
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of lessons to be learned. And just kind of going back a little bit, what I found is that I end up helping my clients with goal setting often because almost everyone is so caught up in their day to day and just getting through what needs to get done now that they're not planning ahead. And it is sometimes a real struggle to get people to do the proactive planning. But growing up as the youngest of 10 kids, one thing I found business wise was how to find your niche. Because in 1 of 10, when you're the youngest, boy, you had to find your niche and find an identity that was uniquely yours. And that's really a lesson that applies in the business world. So when we would sit down at the dinner table, everyone got enough food, but you didn't always get enough of what you wanted. But one trick I learned early was that my mom would always make 2 vegetables. She would always make corn because everybody ate corn, and she'd make one other vegetable. And I requested lima beans every time I could. I like lima beans and almost no one else did. So when she made lima beans, I got as much of a thing that I liked as possible. So in that, that little way, I created my own niche of lima beans as something that I liked. And when people are starting a business, I always tell them to look for the niche, look for the thing that you like, that you're good at, that other people either don't like or aren't good at, and really kind of focus on that. And it helps businesses be much more successful.
Yeah, I like that. It separates you from the rest of them. And going back to what you do with Pinnacle Performance, your team also helps with personal productivity, leadership, communication, selling strategies, motivational leadership. Everything's all about strategy and detail oriented. But I like what you said earlier about you see that sometimes planning ahead can be a struggle. So
Yeah.
when it comes to our listeners, how can they use that planning ahead to their advantage when they're trying to improve their leadership development and personal productivity?
Well, one thing that I always tell people is to focus on what they're doing as much as possible. So I have everybody sit down before their day starts and plan out what they want to accomplish that day. And there will be 1, 2, maybe 3 things that are really important. If you got those 2 things done that day, then it was a successful day. Even though there's 75 other things you want to get done, if you get those 2 done, find out what those are and focus on those. So then I map out and prioritize my day. And I tell everyone to do that before you read emails or listen to voicemails. Because once you read an email or listen to a voicemail, all of a sudden that is sidetracking your day and you're not working on what is the most important thing. You're working on what seems to be the most urgent because you just listened to the voicemail. So then once you're doing it, I always say, turn off all of your notifications. Don't have your computer bing every time an email comes in. Don't let your phone ring. When you're focused on the important things, turn everything off, work on it until you've reached the point you want to get to, and then look at everything else.
I like that. And I think that's so true because if we don't start our day with a certain intention, then we're almost inviting almost any distraction that's available to start consuming our thoughts and dictating how we will move throughout the day. And if we're not careful, any goal that you might have had will probably never be touched because you create these bad habits of allowing other things to dominate your day.
Yeah, then you're just reacting to what other people want from you rather than figuring out what you want to get done.
See, man, that's why I have you on the show, man. And when you also help teach people the importance of delegating. For the audience, kind of break that down. What does it really truly mean to delegate, whether you're a business owner or maybe you have a higher position in a day job and you have people underneath you that you are a supervisor for? What does delegation actually mean? How should we correctly implement that?
Well, whenever I talk about delegating, there's always someone in the room who rolls their eyes. And sometimes there are people who stand up and tell me, I tried delegating once, it doesn't work. So then I have to step back and I say, what are the reasons why you think delegation doesn't work? And the reasons that always come up are, it's faster to do it myself, or I can do it better than anyone else can. And so I have to push back on people and say, it's faster to do it yourself one time. It may take longer to teach someone else how to do a thing, but if it's something that recurs every week, you didn't spend that time, you invested that time, because now you have someone else who is getting this thing done for you week after week after week. So you end up saving time, even though it may cost a little bit more in the beginning. And in terms of doing it better than anyone else can, when you started doing it, you weren't the best at it either. Somebody taught you, or even worse, you had to struggle for a long time and figure out how to do it yourself. So just because someone's not the best at it now doesn't mean they can't be. And what happens when you teach them how to do it well, if you delegate well, then you are teaching your employees. People think about delegation only in the aspect of how it can save them time. But if you shift it and you realize that delegation is how you teach employees to grow and empower them to do more things, all of a sudden that changes. It changes in your mind why you're delegating, because you're delegating to help that person, not just to help yourself.
We're talking to Jeremy Doran here on Army Focus Radio. You can go visit his couple of websites. It's pinnacle-performance.com, and also his book that we'll touch on in a few seconds. The littlekids.us is the book, is where you can find the book. And real quick, just kind of follow up on what you said. This all ties into, setting goals. So for our listener, maybe our listener, if they're not their own boss, their own CEO, entrepreneur, maybe they are working that 9 to 5 and, they have a day job. That also can give them an opportunity to set goals, because where they're working, right now could be a platform for years later for them to have a new opportunity. So for those listening right now, how do they kind of stick out from the noise, if you will, when they are working for their employer?
One thing that I have the people that I'm training do is I have them set 3 large goals in 3 different areas of their lives. I have them pick a personal goal that has nothing to do with work, just a personal goal they want to achieve, whether it's doing something like running a marathon or, visiting Egypt or whatever it is, some personal goal that they have. I ask them to set a work goal. So whatever department they're in, what is a longer term goal they can do to make that whole department better? So it normally is not just getting a thing done, but it's changing a process or improving the way things are done so that it can run better. When you do that, you're definitely going to get noticed if you can make an improvement at the company within your group or department. And then the third goal I have them do is a career goal. And that's normally a longer term one, and it helps them figure out where they want to go. So maybe 5 or 10 years, what do they want their career to be at that point? Because what's going to happen if you don't figure out where you want to go, every time an opportunity comes up, it's going to look like a good opportunity. But if you set that longer term career goal and you know exactly what you want, a promotion may come up and you may look at it and say, it's a great opportunity for now, but it doesn't help me get to where I want to be longer term. So then you know that you want to turn that opportunity down and wait for one that is more aligned with your career goals.
Man, everything you're saying, it just lines up perfectly with what we're discussing today. And even with your book, The Little Kids Lessons Learned from Our Perspective, inside your book, you kind of reflect on the everyday life, if you will. So jumping and switching gears a little bit, talk a little bit about the book and what is your goal for people to take away after they read it.
Great question. We actually just did a book signing this past weekend. And one thing that we realized is how much my family communicated because of the book. So there are a lot of cases in which Sam and I saw something from our perspective, and then they would tell us what was happening in their world at that time. So it really made the family communication so much better because it brought up a lot of stories and instances that we could talk about and get a better understanding of each other. So what I recommended at the end for people who were really liking the book and engaged in it, I recommend that everyone in their family get a copy and read it. And something is going to really resonate with each person. And even if the conversation is which story resonated with you, and then once you figure out which ones did, why, it's a great way to help families get closer. And then I always encourage people, if there are family stories that you tell over and over again, really stop and look at them. Because if you're telling them over and over again, there's probably a good lesson that you learned from that. There's a reason why you're telling it so much. So think about the stories you tell, and then think about what lesson you learned from that. And that is sometimes an easier way to share a lesson with someone else rather than just telling them what a lesson is. But if you can tell the story of your childhood, it helps make the lesson easier to absorb.
And people can go get this book right now. It's available anywhere you get a book. Go Amazon. That's the biggest one everyone plugs. So I'll plug that. Go to Amazon and get The Little Kids Lessons Learned from Our Perspective. And yeah, storytelling is very powerful. And stories, they illustrate, not just who you are, but what's important to you, because growing up, we all have a favorite this or favorite that, favorite food, favorite color. But that is something that is, we discover as we live. And when you get to be an adult, sometimes you can stop living, if you will, because you're just so caught up in either the routine or, worry about things that, you allow to dominate your thoughts. For you, as you are living your life purpose and doing what you're doing with your business and with your book and your platforms, how do you keep that clarity of, okay, this is my purpose, this is what I enjoy doing, versus allowing life to clutter, your thoughts and sometimes your goals?
So glad you brought this up, because I'll tell you, I think that most adults are pretty boring for the most part. And the reason why I realized, I thought about why is it? And it's because most adults lose their curiosity. They're so wrapped up in what they already know and what they're already doing. They rarely stop and just say, what if? When I was a kid, I used to get picked on because I said the phrase, what if, or just think, so often that it would annoy people. But I was always engaged in what could be and what the possibilities were. And I don't ever want to really grow up to the point where I no longer do that. So I think that most adults should really step back to when they were kids and think about how curious they were about different things and how open they were to, the way things might be or could be or ought to be, and bring a little bit of that back. And then when you're setting your goals, it opens up your mind much more than just being on whatever track you're on.
And by the way, listen, on Refocus Radio, talking to Jeremy Doran. You can go to his website to get his book. It's thelittlekids.us. You also visit what he does with his business, Pinnacle-performance.com. And with today's times, I kind of touched on this on a previous show, and that is so many things that we can look at. So we can scroll for days now, and I like how this one guy said on my show, we carry this device with us that is a big distraction because if we allow it to dominate our time, we have infinite places to go and read about or watch or listen to soak up our time. How do you find that space to where you allow yourself to, enjoy, the feeds on social media or, watching movies or the leisure things, but also keeping the mindset that, okay, it's business now. I have to have the structure in order to hit my goals.
Yeah, for most people, I will often tell them to go on a 1-week news hiatus because, boy, you're right. Whether it's scrolling through social media or watching the news on television or whatever it is, you can just stay there forever. And if you go all the way off of it for 1 week, it helps kind of reset so that you're not so drawn into that because you realize there's very little that you actually miss. There's very little that happened that was so important that someone wouldn't tell you about it. So once people realize that, it becomes a little bit easier, I find. But for me, the way I start my day is if I start with structure, then it will continue to be productive. And when I miss my first morning rituals, then that's when the day goes haywire. So at right around 7:00, I always do Qigong, which is a type of meditation, basically. And then I will plan out my day and do some other things. And at 8:00, I start Power Hour. Power Hour is when I'm going to just sit down and do the important things that I need to get done that day. And that goes from 8 until 9. And then once 9:00 happens, I allow myself to stop working on that. And then I will start looking at the rest. But once I've done that, my day's off to a great start and I continue to be productive.
And you mentioned structure, and I think that's a key thing right there. Structure requires discipline. So for you personally, someone listening right now, how can they surround themselves with whether it's the right people or just the right habits to eventually get to that point where their days are full of structure and not just, free for all?
Yeah. The funny thing is that if you give yourself enough structure, then it allows you more freedom throughout your day. If not, you're always scrambling to catch up. So when setting goals for productivity, I always push people to go smaller. So someone might say, I'm going to spend 2 hours doing prospecting. And I'll tell them to cut that back to 15 minutes because the first time 2 hours seems like a great idea, but to keep doing it can be overwhelming. And then they fall off the wagon and then it never gets done. But if you just stick to 15 minutes and then you're free to stop, then you just build the habit. And then every morning you do your 15 minutes and you can be done. And then once that's enough of a habit, then maybe push it out to half an hour. But start small and it's much easier to continue with it.
Yeah, that's a powerful point you made. Yeah, I think that's very true. Without structure, you eventually won't have freedom. I think that's that's a great insight. And when you look at your life and looking back at all the things that you accomplished, of course, it took structure for you to follow through and to show up and to apply yourself. But what's something that you look at and you're like, man, I accomplished that, that's amazing. That, are there any points in your life where you just kind of be like, wow, I actually got to do this?
So I don't like tooting my own horn, but one thing that I was amazed by is I did an Ironman triathlon, and talk about structure that required a couple of years of, sacrificing my weekend mornings to get up and go for a bike ride or a run or a swim or whatever it was. And the funny thing is that after I did it, half of me was amazed because it just seems so unbelievable that anyone and or myself could could do that because it's just so much. But then half of me is like, oh boy, I really could have been faster. Next time I'll do better. But I haven't gone back to do another one yet. But that was to me, it was a great accomplishment.
Man, there's a lot of good points in this show. This is probably one of those episodes people can meditate on daily. Man, first and foremost, we've been talking to Jeremy Doran. You can go to his website, pinnacle-performance.com. And also for his book, you can go to Amazon or go straight to thelittlekids.us. Before we let you go, when you see how, I hate to go to the news again, but when you see on the news there's so many talking points with politics and the economy and all this stuff with health and whatnot, you just pick the buffet line, you're probably going to see something. How do you allow yourself, because I know we touched on it, but just one more time, how do you keep yourself from allowing that fear of the unknown to consume your current moment of just basically living in the now?
You know, my policy with news is that if it's not actionable, I don't want to know about it. So there's obviously some level of things that you need to know about, but I focus on news that is going to allow me to change my actions. And if it's something that is just so general that there's nothing I can change to make a difference either for myself or for other people, then I don't find it all that worthwhile, and I'll tend to turn it off. So I focus on things that I can take action from.
Awesome, man. Well, once again, I want to say thank you to you, Jeremy, talking to us today, talking about setting goals, and also talking about your book that people can get on Amazon. It's The Little Kids Lessons Learned from Our Perspective. Man, once again, I want to say thank you for your time talking to us today.
Oh, it's been great being here. I appreciate it. Thank you.